Hey everybody, and welcome to Dominion Cards, the video series where we take a strategic, in-depth look at various cards from the board game Dominion. Today we're looking at Outpost. This is a 5-cost action and duration card from Seaside, and it says, if this is the first time you played an Outpost this turn, and the previous turn wasn't yours, then take an extra turn after this one, and you only draw 3 cards for your next hand. So this is very different sort of card to anything we've seen before. Lots of very specific and unfamiliar text on this, so we're just going to explain what the heck's going on with this card first of all. So Outpost is one of a few ways in Dominion to gain extra turns. There are a couple of others that are available at the time that this video was made. There is Mission, which is an event from Adventures. There's Fleet, a project from Renaissance. There's Seize the Day, an event from Menagerie. And there is Being Possessed, which is a possession, a card from Alchemy. So extra turns are exactly what they sound like. Basically, it's just you take another turn straight away. They are ignored by the tiebreaker rules, so you should know that in Dominion, the player who took the lowest number of turns wins a tiebreaker, otherwise it's a draw. It might be easier to think the tiebreaker rule as being rounds rather than turns, so every time it gets back to the start player, that's another round. That's just because of the way that extra turns don't count and let you basically take multiple turns without really impacting the tiebreak rule. So this card, the first thing it says is talking about extra turns not being yours or the previous turn. So this means that if there are multiple ways of gaining extra turns present, so not just Outpost, but one of the other ones that I mentioned, then you sort of need to take care that you don't accidentally stop your Outpost from working. Now, this check only applies at the time the card is played, so you can sometimes play multiple of these methods on the same turn, and you will actually get both. So if you buy the Mission event on the same turn that you played an Outpost, you do actually get both extra turns, despite the fact that both Mission and Outpost both say, and the previous turn wasn't yours on it. Now, Possession is something you've got to watch out for with Outpost. So Possession's a weird card. What it does is that it gives the next person in play order an extra turn, but you tell them exactly what to do, basically. So it's not you that gets the extra turn, it's someone else. And what that means is that if you get possessed, your outposts stop working once you regain control of your own turns. And that is because the previous turns where you were being possessed, they were technically your turns, so they cause Outpost to fail. So if you've just been possessed, bear that in mind. Now, that doesn't mean that Outpost is bad when possession is around. What it does mean is that if you are able to get off outposts before your opponent can possess you, then you might be able to actually play possession multiple times on your opponent, because you can choose to take your outpost turn before the possession activates, and you can then use your outpost turn to maybe play the possession again, and therefore get 2 turns from that possession card rather than 1. But once the possessions start happening, the outposts basically stop working. If all players can consistently play possessions, right, the outposts, they just don't do anything anymore. Now, at the beginning of Outpost, it does say, if the first time you played an outpost this turn. What that means is that throne rooms and the cards like that are completely, they don't work with Outpost, basically, because that allows you to play Outpost twice, and only the first play actually does anything. This is the same, of course, if you ended up with multiple Outpost cards in your deck for some reason as well. Only the first one that you played on a turn, you actually get to do anything with it. So if you do throw an outpost for some reason, then bear in mind that, like all duration cards, the throne room will stick to outpost and it will stay out between turns. What that means is that you can't use the throne room on the extra turn. This is despite the fact that on the second play of your outpost, nothing actually happened. It doesn't matter. You've still thrown a duration card, so it still stays in play. Now, there are times when this can actually end up happening, even though it doesn't sound like a good move. So, for example, King's Court might be your only village, in which case, if you want to play the Outpost, well, you got to king it no matter what. Ghost is a card that can accidentally hit your Outpost, and then it thrones it. That's just the way Ghost works. It is worth noting that you still get to use Ways on the subsequent plays of Outpost. You're still playing an action card even though it doesn't do anything. But it's really important if you do this that you do not use the Way on the first play, because if you do that, that will count as playing Outpost, but you won't be following any of the text of Outpost, in which case you just miss your opportunity to actually get an extra turn. So if you did have to, for example, King's Court and Outpost, and there's like Way of the Sheep that earns you money, you will want to actually play Outpost as its standard effect, and then you get to take Way of the Sheep for the other two plays of your Outpost. Some final clarification points. If Outpost fails for some reason, so somehow you've ended up playing an Outpost already this turn, that Outpost will not stay in play between turns. When I say that, like if you throw an Outpost, it will, because one of the effects, like the plays of Outpost worked, but if all of the plays of that particular card didn't do anything, it won't stay out. It's because it's not doing anything. It also means if you throned it, like if for some reason you had two Outposts in your deck and you throned the second one, then the throne wouldn't stay out either, because the Outpost itself is not staying out. Outpost does not give you an extra turn if the game ends before you get a chance to take it. So what that means is if you empty like the last province on your regular turn and you play Outpost, you're not getting an extra turn. If you need an extra turn to score more points, then you need to make sure that you do not actually empty the last pile or the province pile before you get a chance to take the Outpost turn, and you've got to look to do it then. That can be a little bit tricky sometimes, just because Outpost turns are just a little bit worse, which we're going to go over in a while. But you've got to watch out, not get caught out by the way that Outpost works with the game end. Now, Fleet, one of the ways to gain an extra turn, can complicate this because Fleet gives out extra turns only after the game has ended. That means that when you would typically normally not get your Outpost turn, if somebody bought Fleet, then suddenly you will, because the game is actually not over. However, the last person, like in terms of playing their Fleet turns, they won't be able to play Outpost on their Fleet turn and actually get to use it, because the game will in fact end suddenly after the Fleet turn, right? You can't, as the last Fleet player, you can't play other things that give you extra turns and have them work, because the game just ends after the Fleet turn. Alright, so lots of slightly complicated rules there with Outpost, just little things you need to know. A lot of these edge cases are pretty rare, to be honest. I mean, Outpost is fairly simple how it functions most of the time, but these little things can catch you out, and they can be very important just because extra turn is quite a big deal. So, unfortunately, you do just have to understand how Outpost works and pay attention to these. But let's talk about the card strategically now instead. So what's the value of an extra turn? Well, Dominion's a pretty fast game most of the time, especially when you start to get up to the higher competitive, like higher player rankings. It can be a fairly close race where every turn counts, and games don't necessarily go on that long. So, to beat, like, say, Smithy Big Money, games will take, like, 16 turns. But honestly, as you add, like, more powerful expansions later on, a lot of games go a lot faster than that. And so, if you can get one of those turns, like, earlier and get ahead of your opponent in terms of number of turns played, well, it should be fairly obvious that that's going to give you a huge advantage, right? Let's say the game was going to take 16 turns and I bought an Outpost and I got to play it 5 times. Right, well now, I've achieved in turn 11 as far as like the tiebreak rules are concerned. Like round 11, what would normally have happened in round 16, right? Wow, that's a big deal. And you should also know that, Dominion has a first player advantage where the player who goes first in the round order might actually get an extra turn. And for a lot of people, that's a big deal, and they sort of see it as a problem with Dominion's design. Like, oh, this one player gets this massive advantage because they get to take more turns. So here's a card that gives people extra turns. It should be obvious from that, taking more turns is pretty good. Right, so Outpost can be very powerful. In fact, I would say that in the best possible case of Outpost, it's probably the one card with the single most powerful effect written on it. Like when taken in isolation and you've got just one copy of it, just take an entire extra turn. And this is something that you buy Outpost once and you can do it multiple times over the course of the game. Wow, right, that's very strong. And the Outpost turn is not actually restricted in any way. There are no clauses that say, oh, you can't do this on your Outpost turn, right? It is a fully fledged extra turn, right? And that's really good. Now, I say it's a fully fledged extra turn, but of course, there is a drawback. So your Outpost turn, or at least technically the turn before you get your Outpost turn, during its cleanup phase, you only draw 3 cards instead of 5. So you're going to start your Outpost turn with less cards in hand. Now, this is worse than being hit by a militia attack or a ghost ship. That's because you draw 3 cards at random off the top of your deck instead of drawing 5 and getting to pick the best 3 out of those 5. Now, if your deck isn't reliable enough to deal with actually doing something with just 3 cards, you're very likely to dud. You are very, very much more likely to dud on an Outpost turn than you are on your regular normal turns. And this is the balancing factor of Outpost and what makes it not work sometimes. If you can't overcome this much, much less reliable start, then Outpost isn't really going to do very much for you. Now, there are things that can make dudding not be quite so bad, you might have good cheap cards, or there might be baths where if you just don't do anything on a turn you get 2 points or whatever. But generally, if you're just going to be dudding, you wouldn't bother with Outpost, right? You really want to be getting an entire extra turn that's just as good as your regular turns to make Outpost really, really strong. So the biggest deal with Outpost is access to draw. If you don't have any way of increasing your hand size, it's really hard to get much value out of that turn that just starts with 3 coins. If you've ever played a militia game where there's no draw, some militia big money thing, you will know that it's pretty hard to actually do much. Well, this time you're going to be drawing the estates and all that instead of actually discarding them like you would in militia big money. So now they're really bad turns. Not having any draw is the number one reason why Outpost wouldn't actually be worth it in a game, I would say. Just only having a 3-card hand size is pretty bad. Even cantrip kingdoms, where every card that you buy might have +1 card and +1 action written on it, as soon as you start buying provinces, they are going to fall apart way sooner than they would on your regular turn, because you just can't handle... you only need 3 stop cards, and now all of a sudden you can't draw your whole deck, as opposed to being able to get 5 until that happens, right? So you're just going to start dudding a lot sooner. Now, some cards are like small hand sizes, like Draw to X, and you've got stuff like Diplomat, that is non-terminal, it's like a village when your hand size is small. Those can get a bit of a boost with Outpost, but bear in mind, you've still got to actually start with them in your hand and a way to play them, right? It's all very well buying something like Library to use with Outpost, but if you draw Library on its own with no village, or you just don't draw Library in your starting hand, well, fat lot of good that did you, right? So how are we going to deal with this? So there's lots and lots of cards across Dominion that add reliability to your deck. We always talk about it when we discuss them, and I don't want this video to just be this massive long list of a gazillion Dominion cards, so I'm not going to go into super big lists saying what they are. But Outpost makes any card that is more reliable than others more important than usual. And it's not just cards whose sole function is giving you reliability. It can be that you have 2 different types of terminal draw card available, and one of them is just a little bit more reliable than another, right? Well, you might actually find that the one that's a little bit more reliable, for whatever reason, whatever bonus effect it has, might be more important than usual. It could be that you want to end your turn with like a courtyard, or use a patrol to rearrange the cards on top of your deck. Like that sort of thing might be better than like going for regular smithy, for example. Right, this is because Outpost is just so likely to dud. But also, if you do manage to overcome the low starting hand size, you get this massive payoff in the fact that you got this whole extra turn to basically do everything your deck can do a second time. Right, that's gigantic payoff when you think about it. If a source of reliability is fairly weak, it can become more important when Outpost is around. So like Caravan, for example, you draw an extra card at the start of your turn. Sounds good, but it's only every other turn, and it's not necessarily going to be that great a lot of the time. But when you only start with 3 random cards instead of 5, suddenly drawing 1 extra card might be a big deal, right? Or Haven, putting those villages into your starting hand next turn, right? Suddenly that looks really, really good and a lot better than it normally might do. So if you can get your deck really thin, then this is usually the best way to make your deck very reliable. So there's lots of benefits to trashing all of your junk and getting really super thin. One is that you just don't need as many engine components to give you a good proportion of your deck, so that you might reasonably draw them, right? Because if you want to draw a village in your starting hand with Outpost, then you kind of need like 1/3 of your deck to be villages. And well, when you just don't have that many cards in your deck, it's not that hard to get your deck up to like having 1/3 villages. You don't need that many because you've got very few cards. You also need like less supporting cards to add reliability to your deck, right? You don't need to add as many, sellers or whatever, right? So that means that you can start getting the most out of Outpost a lot sooner than you otherwise might do if you just got more cards in your deck. So what other things do we have other than trashing? Well, anything that gives you a strong effect at the start of your turn is going to be very good with Outpost. So most duration cards work pretty well with Outpost. So we talked about stuff like Caravan and Haven, but Fishing Village is like a free village effect at the start of your turn, very good. Wharf should be obvious, like Tactician. Clearly those are going to be super great with Outpost. That should be clear. Just suddenly draw a load of cards at the start of your turn, fantastic. Top deckers can remove the randomness out of the cards that you have in your starting hand. So Courtyard or Scheme, or lots and lots of examples. I'm not going to go through them all. Villager tokens. These are really helpful for not dudding. Means that if you draw your villages out of order, you're not screwed. So that's super nice. And even coffers mean that if you do dud, you might actually still be able to buy a card that you want by just spending coffers then. So, these things that you hold between turns are very useful. You've also got stuff like Guide that goes on your Tavern mat, but, not all Tavern mat cards are actually that good with Outpost. Like Transmogrify might be good, but also it might be harder to find a target that you actually want to transmogrify. Like, it depends, right? And stuff like Wine Merchant, like, it's not, that's no use for like Outpost. Now, one thing that's special with Outpost is that sometimes you get these events that can draw you cards at the start of your turn or hold on to cards between turns. So like Save and Expedition. And because they are events rather than duration cards, you add them on your cleanup phase and you have to sit with them between turns. Now sometimes you get cards like Militia and Ghost Ship, hand size attacks, and they can sort of make it so that you can't use Expedition, because if you're just going to get militiaed, then having like 7 cards in hand between turns, they're just going to get dropped back down to 3, and that's a problem. But when Outpost is around, suddenly you can use these cards even in the presence of like Militia, and that is because you're not going to get attacked in between your regular turn and your Outpost turn. So now it's totally safe to do that. So that's just another benefit of Outpost, right? You can use something like Expedition in the presence of these cards and actually still be able to make use of it. It is worth noting that some forms of reliability do reduce your hand size, like Warehouse and Cellar. Now, these might actually still be useful for you to like help you through your deck, but you really want to watch out if you add like too many warehouses. to a deck that's with Outpost, you may find that you kill your hand size very quickly. You sort of want to be able to draw a bit first and then use them. And if you start with them, you get unlucky and then your starting hand, you could actually be in big trouble. So you just want to be a bit careful with those. It's without giving you a specific kingdom, it's sort of impossible to say whether these are good or bad. It's very kingdom dependent, but do take care. Just because you recognise Seller is a reliability card doesn't mean that suddenly you can load yourself with loads of them and it's going to work. Right? Outpost is actually just a little bit more, what's the term I'm looking for? It cares a little bit more about the fact that these things reduce your hand size while giving you the reliability. It's just kind of the opposite of what you want with Outpost to some extent. But they still have use. So, extra turn should be, the obvious benefit of why would you want an extra turn? It's going to be that you just go a lot faster. You do more in less rounds, right? You build your deck in less time. But this isn't the only thing you really get to do with extra turns. Even if you don't get to take full advantage, you didn't get to draw your entire deck and you had to, you only got half a turn, you can still get a lot of other benefits from just having an extra turn. So, for example, cards can trash, and if you think about cards like Steward, one of the problems that Steward has as a trash card is that you don't necessarily get to do very much with your remaining turn because, you've only got 2 cards left in hand, and that means you're only buying a 2-cost card, and maybe there aren't any, or maybe they're not very good. If you drew a Steward in your Outpost turn along with 2 trash cards, well, now you can do the trashing, and you weren't going to buy anything anyway, right? So you just get to get that extra thinning, and then on your next regular turn, it's going to be better, and you don't have to worry about how trashing from your hand sort of makes that hand worse, because you just get that extra turn to just get rid of the cards and move on, and not buy anything anyway. Some attacks are stackable, like junking attacks, for example, and when you've got Outpost, you get to hit your opponent with them more often between turns. So I talked about, I know possession's not an attack, but this is how I talked at the start, that you Outpost, you get to play these important cards a second time before your opponent can do anything. So you just get to give them all the curses a lot faster before your opponent can react. Right? They end up with more junk in their deck between their turns. Every turn comes with an extra action and a buy, right? You always start every turn with 1 action, and you can buy 1 card. So sometimes you just want extra actions, extra buys. Technically, an extra turn is doing that. Now, I know that the extra action's a bit funny there, but, technically, it is that you just get a chance to play more action cards, and sometimes that really matters. And, of course, you do cycle through your deck a little bit. Even if you dud, you did get 3 more cards through your deck. So there are these things that are happening even if the extra turn doesn't work out wholly for you. Now, it's easy to always think of these sorts of engine payload cards in terms of always having some crazy mega engine, but the truth is that sometimes boards just don't give you very good engines, right? You might be limited in some way. So singleton boards are an example. That is, there is no plus buy, and there's no other way to actually gain extra cards. You can only ever add 1 card to your deck at most. You can still get good engines in those, but the output is limited, right? The best thing you can ever do is add 1 province per turn. Outpost can be absolutely critical in these sorts of boards, even though the engine's not spectacular, because it's the only way to build your deck faster, and it's the only way to gain more than 1 province per round. So, even if it's not some super explosive mega engine, Outpost is still really good. Even if there are no villages, you might look at Outpost and say, well, this is a terminal action, right? By playing Outpost, I don't get to play some other card. But of course, because you're getting that 1 extra action from your extra turn, you might be able to alternate between Outpost and some other terminal card, but, your non-terminal draw needs to be good enough to actually make your turn work, your Outpost turn work. And it has to be non-terminal draw in that case. Non-terminal draw is often worse than terminal draw for obvious reasons. It's quite hard if there's only non-terminal draw to actually draw your deck every turn, right? If only laboratories are available, there's only so many, and they're quite expensive, and they only go so far. So a little bit harder in that case, but don't worry about the fact that Outpost is a terminal. Even if you've got no village, you might still be able to use it because you get to play something else. And it's worth noting that the Outpost is not actually in your deck during your Outpost turn because it's still in play between turns. It's still in your play area, so you don't have to worry about drawing it or it getting in the way. Right. So that was quite a lot, so let's do a summary of Outpost. So this is one of the best engine payload cards in the game, honestly. It doubles the entire output of your deck. If there is any card that's going to give you a reason to go for the engine, then Outpost is very, very heavily going to incentivize it, just because you just get all these extra turns if you can play it every round, right? And just suddenly your deck is going twice as fast, and that's huge. Very, very rarely do you ever want more than one Outpost for what I hope are obvious reasons. I can't actually think of a case where I ever did get more than one Outpost, but I'm sure some deck exists somewhere, but I've never seen it. Not being able to draw your deck is the most common reason why you wouldn't want to pick up Outpost. And this can include just that drawing your deck is non-viable because there's no trashing available, and you just have too much junk. You're very susceptible to junk with Outpost's 3-card hand. They really do get in the way. So just think about, how easy is it to draw my deck? And if the answer is very bad, then maybe you don't want Outpost. It's just going to get in the way, and you're not going to be able to do anything with your Outpost turn. All forms of reliability become more important because dudding with Outpost becomes more likely. So you really want to avoid dudding to get the value from those extra turns. So here we are in the online client. What we're going to do is we're going to generate some random kingdoms that include Outpost, and we're going to assess how good it is in these kingdoms. So right away here, I spot Outpost with Fishing Village and Caravan, some extra duration cards. Fishing Village, very good if there's any terminal draw, which there is. There is Smithy. That's great. There is no trashing is the main problem here. So what do we do? But there is Diplomat as well. The lack of trashing is pretty bad, though. Is Minion going to be better? Not really, necessarily. Is there any plus buy? There is this Courtier. There is Workshop. So we can gain a lot of Fishing Villages, Wishing Wells, Caravans, Diplomat, Smithies. We can load our deck with tons of engine components, and that means that I think that Outpost still gonna work. You are gonna have some duds, but that's fine. And you get to just build this engine, and hopefully you get to use your Courtier on something that gives you 2, and you have one of them and you get a buy. And your Fishing Village will give you some money, which is nice. And it might gain you some golds. This feels like a deck where I really want to avoid silvers as much as I can, actually. So I'm going to open Fishing Village and Workshop. I don't really care for Lurker because I don't actually want that many 5 costs. There's only one card that costs 5, and Workshop gains me everything else. And I'm going to load up on Fishing Villages, Smithies, Wishing Wells, Caravans. Maybe I don't care so much about Diplomat because I've got Fishing Village. And I'm just going to get as many of these 6 cards as I can, and I will get 1 Courtier and I will get 1 Outpost, and that's my engine. So that's what I'm doing. So Outpost, definitely using it here. Minion, I'm not really worried about. This doesn't seem great for a Minion deck, honestly. So Outpost, very good here. We get exactly 1, of course, as we always will. There is an engine there. It's worth going for. Outpost makes it a lot easier for the engine to win there. Here, there is no trashing again, and this time there is no draw. Now, there is Treasury that top decks itself, so dud turns might not be so bad, but honestly, there is no engine here. You can't trash and you can't draw. It's not going to work out, right? You can't. There's good engine cards like Conspirator, and there's 2 villages. There's 3 villages, 2 of them draw. But yeah, these cards are all very bad. honestly. So what do you actually do instead? I think we ignore Outpost here completely, and we go for... Is it really like cut purse, big money with some mills? Like that feels quite bad, but I don't know what else we would do. We might even get an embargo something at some point. If our opponent tries to do the engine, then we could absolutely maybe embargo something for a laugh. But otherwise, this feels really bad. And I think it has to be like cut purse, mills, and big money, and that's kind of all we're doing here. That's really sad. But yeah, so this is no Outpost because there is no engine, and Outpost doesn't work because there's basically no draw. And you're not going to be able to do anything in your Outpost turn. Here, is there a village? There is. There is throne room. There is trashing at last. We have upgrade. We technically have mine as well, but basically upgrade. And there's remodel too. The draw is library, which is okay because our village is throne room, but the only non-terminal is upgrade, which can make that difficult, I suppose. Only plus buy is Baron as well. There is Bandit to get a lot of golds. I like Bandit with remodel, and for that reason, I think it is worth trying to draw to X. Now, the big worry about this deck is that Outpost turn to work, you have to draw a hand of very specifically throne room, like 2 throne rooms and a library. I don't even think throne room upgrade a library could work because your 3-card hand, what are you going to upgrade out of it when you throne the upgrade? You have to be forced to trash something, and you can't really do that with a 3-card hand. So I actually think Outpost, even though there is a hint of an engine, you actually can't use it here. You can't use it because there is no way to kick off an engine turn with only 3 cards, because you're forced to throne upgrade or get super lucky with throne room and library, and I just don't see it happening in any reasonable way. So what else do we do? Well, I do like remodel with Bandit, but how exactly do you kick that off? I think you go for upgrades, you get thin, and you look to remodel a bunch of golds. And you totally can do a little bit of maybe throne room upgrade and library, but you're not going to have a lot of draw, right? You're gonna look to throne and upgrade. That'll lower your hand size. You draw a library. You play a bandit. You remodel gold, and you buy a province. It's not a super strong engine. It's very limited on what it can do. I don't even know if Baron is very useful here. Honestly, doesn't feel it. So you're probably only getting 1 thing a turn. But you can totally do the getting thin, but I actually think that Outpost is quite bad here, and I think you can to make it work as much as you would want to, which is unusual, honestly, in an engine, but the very particulars of this one, drawing is awkward, and the villaging is awkward, just because of the lack of non-terminals except a forced trasher one, so... Yeah, so I think we don't bother with Outpost there, but we are looking to remodel golds. That's sort of our main goal in that deck, I think. What's going on here? So we got a village, and we got witch, and the trashing is... Well, there's moneylender, which is fine, and there's trading posts. You know what? The trashing's all right, actually. There is Artisan, which seems very good. It's going to be gaining us villages. We want to get a load of witches. We want to get a load of villages. There is no plus buy, but there is gaining with Artisan. We do want an outpost. We do want to be using the Artisan, throning the Artisan and doing it again on an outpost turn. Because there's library, maybe, and there's haven as well, which can be useful with outpost. So I think we've got a good engine here. We open moneylender and silver. Oh, no, it can't be haven. We've got to hit 6 at some point. So we open moneylender silver. Hopefully we get 6 early by sheer luck, but we probably won't. We're going to look to get witch, and mining village, we're going to get thin. We're going to get a trading post to trash the curses that come in as well. We're going to have a bunch of silvers that we're not too happy with, but that's just how it's going to be. There is decent payoff for building the engine here, especially with like Artisan giving us a load of extra cards, Throne Rooms, Throning Witch. You can build up to Province. It's going to be tough if you don't build the engine, because like Witch being throned and all that's going to destroy you. So yeah, so Outpost is going to be good. I think you totally can. What you might be able to do actually is top deck a library for your Outpost turn, and maybe even like Haven a village, or like Haven libraries in villages, but because you're playing Artisan you will be top decking stuff, so I think the reliability is there for Outpost. And you can use, like, have a one library in your deck and maybe, Haven it for your Outpost turn. Right, that'll be really good. We are reliant on, like, the Artisan to actually, like, gain some of these cards. Or we might be able to pick up a Haven instead of getting, like, too many silvers, because we will get a trading post and it's going to flood us with silvers. We don't actually want to buy that many. Is Moat good here? I'm not so sure, because it's hard to buy a lot of them. But you know what? Maybe we could top deck that on our Outpost turn when we've got an Artisan, and so like maybe actually that's helpful to stop us being flooded with silvers from trading posts. But basically Outpost is good here. I think that's why we were really here. You're definitely using it. There is a good engine and it really helps make that engine viable. You kind of need the extra turns and Artisan for the end game jostling, because you've got no other form of buy. Here comes the last kingdom. We have... There is no there is trashing. There's Moneylender. There's technically mine, but forget that. Workshop's really sad here. The only cards it can gain are Moneylender and Shantytown, which is a terrible selection for Workshop. And we can't get rid of it because the only trashing is Moneylender after we've picked up some Shantytowns. So we really don't want to do that. I do like the look of Shantytown with Patrol. Tactician, can that work here? The only way it's going to work is by playing Shantytown with Merchant Ship. That's pretty bad, but it actually can work because we only need to play 2 Merchant Ships per turn. I actually think we can get thin enough that we might be able to double Tactician, and double Tactician is nice with Outpost because we don't, it massively protects us from this 3-card hand because we draw 5 cards at the start of our turn. So I'm actually wondering if this is Tactician Merchant Ship, like double Tactician with Merchant Ship and Shantytowns. And we can probably get away with trying to get an Artisan to pick up. Instead of a Workshop, we use Artisan to get Shantytowns. And we're probably going to buy some instead of silvers, honestly. We don't want silvers in our deck. We can't get rid of them when we've got them. And we're never getting rid of the estates. So I'm going to open Moneylender. And I'm probably going to open with Shantytown as well, in the hope that they don't collide. And I want to get to Artisan if I can. That's going to be difficult without silvers, so I might have to pick up a Patrol if I hit 5. Or maybe I can get a Tactician, and I just hope to buy Artisan on a Tactician after using it. And then we try and build this very awkward deck until we can get a double Tactician up and gain some Merchant Ships. Is this actually good, or are we better off with Patrol big money? Maybe that's all just a big waste of time. The payoff's really low for building this awkward engine. I actually think I've changed my mind. We do get to Outpost if we build double Tactician. So we actually can spend a bit more time. The other alternative is Patrol big money with harems instead of golds. And maybe that's good. Maybe that's better. I think the Outpost deck with double Tactician might be too much work for not enough payoff. And it also can't really deal with getting a load of duchies in the end game in the way that the Patrol player can. They can get a lot of duchies, no problem, because they've got Artisan. But their deck falls apart because the Tactician deck can't really deal with it. Shantytown is not going to draw, and I think they might struggle. I'm not so sure. But I wonder if the fact that Harem is here actually pushes Patrol big money to the win. Like, I would probably open Moneylender anyway and Silver, and I get Patrol and Harems, and I just shoot for provinces. I might be able to do better than trying to set up this incredibly awkward engine otherwise that just doesn't feel very good. Because if you don't double Tactician, what else is there to do, really? The other engine is too awful. So, yeah, okay. I think, therefore, like, Outpost makes this very difficult to know whether the engine is good enough or not. If Outpost wasn't here, I think it's clearly Patrol big money with Harem. But because Outpost is so good as an engine payload, I'm actually not sure, and I just can't tell from this whether the engine's actually going to be better or not. What do you think? Maybe you could let me know. Yeah, I'm really not sure. Anyway, as you can see from those kingdoms, when the engine is viable, Outpost really helps it a lot, and your aim is to basically play Outpost as often as possible. Like, very strong card, and when the engine is not viable, you just ignore it. Right, so that's the long and short of Outpost. Get those duration cards and reliability going, and it's going to be really strong. I hope this was useful for you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.